Okay, today I'll show the examination or the assessment of the higher cerebral function. Really, the higher cerebral function, first of all, consists of the assessment of the level of consciousness. Consciousness means that the patient is aware and alert for both self and environment and is able to respond to internal changes, for example, hunger, and for external changes. Really, the assessment of the level of consciousness, the patient may take one of the following forms that will be described just a few moments later. By the level or the stimuli by which the patient can be aroused. Just like this, if we start the examination and greet the patients, and the patient is responding to you, open his or her eyes, look at you, and responding very well to stimuli. This state, we call it an alertness, and the patient is alert. So I'll show you how to assess the level of consciousness. Assalamu alaikum. Zain inshallah. Okay, so the patient is reacting to me. He's open his eyes and look at me and responding to my questions. So the patient is alert. Second form of disturbed level of consciousness may take the form of what we call it lethargic patient. Lethargic patient, just like sleepy patient. He is responding, but usually to a louder voice than this voice, and the patient open his eyes, look at you, responding to stimuli, but in a sleepy manner, and soon will return back into its basic status once the stimuli is completed. This is what we call it the lethargy. So we have to greet the patient in a louder voice. Instead of normal voice, we have to increase the volume of voice. The third form of altered level of consciousness is what we call it obtundation. And the patient is obtunded when he is somewhat confused and responding to you, open his eye and look at you when you shake him or her, just like when you're shaking a patient. He's turning and looking at you, but once the stimuli also is completed, the patient returns back into his or her own basic status. This is obtundation. The fourth form of the altered level of consciousness is what we call it stuporous. The patient is stuporous and the state is stupor when the patient is unable to respond to any stimuli, seems to lost his consciousness, but responding only to strong stimuli. Really, the strong stimuli, we have many applications for that, but these measures are usually needs a permission from the examination committee at the time of exam, and may take the form of pressure at the supraorbital ridges, just like this pressure, or with a blunt object, hard blunt object at the sternum, or squeezing of the Achilles tendon. These measures are considered painful to the patient, and a patient with this measure, if he is responding to them, so the patient is stuporous. Otherwise, if the patient unable to respond even to this measure, this state we call it coma, and the patient became comatose. Really, the disturbance of the level of consciousness had many causes, and the candidate should know about them very carefully. Okay, the next step in the assessment of the higher cerebral function is to assess the speech. Really, in the assessment of speech, we have to test the language contents of the patient, and we have to test also the articulation and phonation, the speech in general. Really, we have two steps in the assessment. All these two steps are designated just to elicit whether the patient had any disturbance in the speech in the form of aphasia or dysphasia, and dysarthria, and dysphonia or aphonia. What is meant by aphasia or dysphasia are usually used interchangeably during the clinical training, which means that the patient had a defect or difficulty in the language. while the dysarthria means that the patient had difficulty in articulation, and that of dysphonia means decreased ability to vocalize, while aphonia means inability to vocalize. First of all, I'll test the language ability of the patient by asking him the following questions and order him the following comments. Really, I'll start with comprehension, then fluency, then naming, repetition, reading and writing. First step, comprehension. I'll offer to the patient a paper and I'll ask him to fold it in half and keep it in his pocket if he had, or under his leg for example. اسحب هاي الورقة، طبق لنا اياها من النص وخليها جوا رجلك اليسرى. جوا رجلك اليسرى. Okay, we'll see these are 3 steps. The first one, the patient had taken the paper, fold it in half, and then keep it either in his pocket or under his leg. Really, when I order the examination or this test for the patient, I take a place behind the patient, or you can hide your mouth so as not to make the patient lip read you. This is the first step. The second step is the fluency of the patient. We have to ask him about his or her own story, but really our volunteer had no complaint, but I'll ask him about a previous complaint and to see his fluency in the speech. بس حماد تقدر ذاك اليوم تقول لنا شنو اللي صار عندك من دخل أو شيء؟
اللي دخل الكهرباء.
إيه بعد اللي بعدها شنو صار؟ صرت زين يعني بعدها أو شيء؟ Okay. We had seen the fluency really in during the clinical examination, and when you have a real patient with at the time illness, the patient will talk, listen to his talking, listen to his language, and to see whether the patient had fluent speech or non-fluent speech. This is the second step. The third step is naming. I'll ask the patient about many objects to name it to me. This object should be familiar to the patient. Just like this, I'll ask him the following questions. هاش نسميها؟
ساعة.
ساعة. هاش نسميها؟ ها؟ حلق. هذا شو نسميها؟
قلم.
هذا شو نسميه؟
مسطرة.
مسطرة. مثلا هذا شو نسميه؟
ماس.
هذا شو نسميها؟
مطر.
ما شنو؟ Okay. Really, in patients who had aphasia, naming difficulty, or what we call it anomia, is the most common feature for patients with aphasia. You have to ask him for about 20 objects, but really when you ask him about 5 names of objects, you can take a permission from the examination committee that shall or will you continue or not, and you have to listen for his speech. Really, the patient, if he had inability to name the patient, this condition is called as anomia. Sometimes patient may name the patient, but in the following manner. For example, when I ask him what is this, instead of saying this is a pen, he will say the thing that writes. Okay, instead of that. Sometimes the patient may provide with wrong term or with wrong word, substitution of word. For example, if we in Arabic, for example, if I ask him what is this, instead of saying qalam, he will say malam. This condition, what we call it paraphasia, and we have many forms of paraphasia. This is the third step. The fourth step, I'll ask him the patient simple sentence, and he had to repeat it after me. I'll ask him the following sentence. بس حماد تقدر تقول وراي ذهب الولد إلى المدرسة.
ذهب الولد إلى المدرسة.
Okay, this is a simple sentence just to test the patient's ability to repeat the sentence, or he had the capability to repeat the sentence or not. After that, I'll ask him about the reading. really in reading, the best action is to ask the patient to read motor commands, motor acts. For example, I'll write for him the following sentences. Okay, if we had a focusing here, I'll ask him the following acts. First of all, I'll ask him to raise his right hand or arm. Then I'll ask him to withdraw his leg, and then to raise the left hand. For example, I'll ask him to read them and to perform them if the patient had the ability to read and to write. حمار تعرف تقرأ تكتب؟ استقرنا ذني.
ارفع يدك اليمنى.
يلا طبق لنا اياها. اوكي. عشت ايدك هسه نزل ايدك، هسه بعد شنو؟
اسحب رجلك.
اي. هاي انت اساسا ساحبها، اوكي.
ارفع يدك اليسرى.
ارفع يدك اليسرى. عشت ايدك. Okay, so the patient had the ability to read and had the ability to perform the following motor acts. After that, the last step in the speech assessment of the language content of the speech, I'll ask him to write something. But in reality, writing here, we can also ask the patient to write his complaint, the same story that we ask him at the start when we test the fluency. We can ask him also to write these events. هسه حمادة تكتب لنا اللي قلت لنا اياه صار عندك ذاك اليوم. شنو اللي صار عندك ذاك اليوم ممكن تكتب لنا اياه. وين بعد وراها شنو اللي سويته رحت وين رحت شيء. Okay, let's see what our volunteer had. Right, he said that he had some sort of dizziness in Arabic, really, and then he had some sort of pre-syncope or syncope, and then he consulted the hospital at that time. Why this is important? Because patient with paraphasia, as we said previously, who had substitute one word with another, when we ask him about his complaint to talk about, he will say, for example, as I said previously, he had, instead of pencil, he will say pencil. In Arabic, instead of qalam, he will say malam. He will write the same thing. He will write malam instead of qalam, and this is important to first of all test the writing ability and to confirm any paraphasia. This is really with respect to the assessment of the speech content. Then the next step in the assessment is to assess the articulation and phonation of the speech. I'll ask him the following speech, and each one of them had a meaning in the examination. First of all, I'll ask him to repeat the following, or a sentence, a word with D or L or T, the following letters. I'll choose a simple one. حمادة تقدر تقول لا 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 لا.
لا 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 لا.
Okay, عشت. This will test the lingual capability to produce letters. And then I'll ask him about the lip function. I'll ask him to repeat after me the following sentence. هسه بعدي تقول مي 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 مي
مي مي مي مي مي.
Okay, so tongue function is intact and lip function is intact. Then I'll ask him to repeat the following sentence to test whether the patient had monotonous speech or scanning speech for cerebellar dysarthria and so on. Also, we have to look about the tongue and lip function with the following in the following sentence. هسه أريدك تقول الجامعة المستنصرية.
الجامعة المستنصرية.
Okay, we're listening for all these letters. After that, I'll ask him to count from 1 to 30, and lastly, I'll ask him to cough. Why? From 1 to 30 to assess whether the patient had fatigable dysarthria, that is characteristic of a neuromuscular junction disorder in the form of myasthenia gravis, for example, the most common, or not, and then to cough to see whether the patient had involvement of the palate or not. طيب هسه أنت أريدك تحسب من 1 ل 30.
1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15.
Okay, I'll satisfy up to this level, but at the time of examination you have to continue up to 30, and I'll ask him now to cough to see whether the patient have bovine cough or not. هسه بس خلينا ايدك هيجي وتقع. Okay, so he had no any bovine cough. From these sentences really, or from these steps, one can decide whether the patient had dysarthria in the form of spastic dysarthria, in the form of flaccid dysarthria, in the form of cerebellar or ataxic dysarthria, myasthenic dysarthria, extrapyramidal characteristic of Parkinson or not, and also listen to the voice of the patient, whether he had whether the speech had low volume, or the patient had dysphonia or unable at all to produce sound. He had the ability to produce the sound, but he can't because of the involvement of the larynx, and this is characteristic of dysphonia and aphonia. Okay, the next step in the assessment of higher cerebral function is to assess whether the patient is oriented or not. That's to say, orientation. Really, orientation, you have to test the patient ability to be oriented to the following: the person, place, and time. First of all, I'll ask about the time in the following manner. بس حماد هسه تقدر تقول لنا هسه الدنيا الصبح ظهر ليل الدنيا الليل تقريبا بالساعة برأيك؟
7:30.
Okay, so the patient able to recognize, and he is oriented for the time now, and then I'll ask him about the place. هسه احنا حاليا وين؟ بالمستشفى. Okay, so he is oriented for the place. This is the second. And third, we have to ask him about the persons, really the patient's relative. We will ask him about them and about himself. At the time of examination, if there is no chaperones, you can ask the patient about him or herself and about yourself. بس حمال تقدر تعرف أنا منو؟
دكتور عبد الحمزة.
Okay, وأنت منو؟
محمد.
Okay, so he is able to recognize and he had the ability to be oriented for himself and for the examiner. Really, this is about the orientation. The next step in the assessment of the higher cerebral function is about the memory. Real memory also, we will take 3 types of memory, although it is more than this, but we will satisfy with these 3 types. First of all, I'll assess the recent memory, and then I'll assess the short-term memory, and lastly I'll assess the long-term memory. Really, for the recent or immediate term memory, I'll say to the patient a sentence. For example, you can say for him your name or any event, and tell him that you are gonna to immediately after that ask him about what you have said in the following manner. حمادة، أنا دكتور عبد الحمزة راجوج، أشتغل هنا بالمستشفى. هاي الجملة أريدك تحفظ ليها، لأن هسه راح أسألك بيها وبعدين راح أسألك بيها. أوكي؟ شنو اللي قلت لك إياه؟
أنا دكتور عبد الحمزة راجوج، أشتغل بالمستشفى.
Okay, so his immediate term memory is intact. For the short term memory, we need 5 minutes to be elapsed, so I'll postpone it to the last of examination. And for the long term memory, you have to choose previous events, and this is really according to the patient's age. So you can ask him about his, if he is elderly, of course, about his marriage status, about any war events, for example, Gulf War or whatever. the events in the following manner. I'll ask the patient about this events. بس حمادة تشقد كان عمرك بالحرب أول ما بدت الحرب؟ يعني حرب إيران ملحق عليها مثلا؟ ما ملحق بس سنة واحدة آخر شي بيها. زين. وأول عملية صارت علينا، أول عملية عسكرية ب90 91 اي شو ملحق عليها؟ ومن ضربنا قصبنا بوشي ايش ملحق عليها؟ وين كنت؟ هنا بالنجف، كربلاء، ديواني، وين كنت؟ بالحلة كنت هناك وملحق عليها. تتذكر منها؟ ايش تتذكر منها مثلا؟
أتذكر القصف اللي كان.
تتذكر القصف اللي كان؟ اوكي. كان ايش قد عمرك بذاك الوقت؟
كان 13 سنة.
13 سنة. يا مواليد؟
مواليد 90.
مواليد 90 وهاي كان عمرك 13 سنة. يعني قصدك الحرب آخر حرب
هي مال 2003.
مال 2003 كان عمرك بيها. أنت مواليدك بال90 مواليدك، يعني ما تتذكر قبل هالضربات من كان عمرك 6 سنوات 8 9 تتذكر بال2003. أوكي. He's able to retain the informations gained previously in the form of long-term memory. Really after that I think 5 minutes had been elapsed. I'll ask him about the sentence that I had given him and ask him to keep it. That I will later after a few moments I'll ask him about. زين قبل شوية سألتك أنا قلت لك فد شغلة لازم تحفظها لأنه راح أسألك بيها. شنو هي؟
أنا دكتور عبد الحمد راجوج أشتغل بهذا المستشفى.
Okay. So he is able to retain the information of the short-term memory. Really after assessment of the memory we will assess the patient's ability or the patient's calculation ability in the following manner. I'll ask him either to subtract serial 7 from 100, which is I think it's so difficult, so I'll ask him to subtract serial 3s from 20, and at each step I'll ask him why. حمادة 20 إذا تشيل منها 3 ايش قد يبقى؟
17.
ايش عجب؟ شلون؟ تشيل منها 3 يعني شلون إذا حسبت لنا إياهن؟
من واحد يعني.
لا أنت 20 عندك وتنقص منها 3 فايش راح تصير؟ 17 يعني 20 19 18 راح تبقى. ال 17 نقص لنا 3 14 ليش؟
لأن السابعة 17
16 ولا 15 15 نقص لنا 3 12 ال 17 نقصنا منها 3 ايش قد صارت؟
14.
هسه شو تقول؟ ايش قد 14 14 نقص لنا 3 11 صارت. اوكي. At each step really we have to ask the patient why, but this is in reality depend upon the educational level of the patient, whether he is educated well to know how to subtract or not. This is the calculation ability. After that I'll ask the patient or I'll test the attention and concentration. Attention means focusing upon a thing, while the concentration is the ability to sustain such a focusing. Really the previous task that I'll ask the patient about, which is subtraction, can be used for the attention and concentration. The patient was attentive and concentrated. But if you would like to assess further, you can ask him the following 2 questions. حماد راح أعطيك كلمة تقلب لنا إياها بالعكس وتقرأها. أوكي؟ كلمة حلب من تنقلب بالعكس شلون تنقرأ؟ بلح تصير. اوكي. so he's able to, and then I'll ask him about number. هسه راح اعطيك رقم هم تقلب لي اياه وتقول لي ايش قد يصير. 591 من ينقلب ايش يصير؟ 90 من ينقلب 195. so he's able, so his attention is good and his concentration is good. After that really I'll ask him about reasoning and judgment. I'll ask him common questions just to elicit whether there are any abnormality about reasoning and judgment or not. طيب إذا أنت كنت تتمشى يم دائرة مع البريد ولقيت أكو يم صندوق بريد أكو لقيت في الظروف ومختوم وعليه طابع لقيته واقع بالقاع، شنو اللي تسوي؟
ترجع البريد.
ترجع ليش؟
لازم يوصل لحد
لازم يوصل لحد so he is good. طيب إذا مثلا هنا قاعدين أو فد مكان معين وشفت فد حريق صار، شنو اللي تسوي؟
أبلغ الأطفال.
تبلغ الأطفال. Okay, so his really judgment is good and his reasoning for that is also good. After that, I'll ask lastly, I'll ask the patient about the proverb interpretation. I'll provide him with common proverbs and I'll ask him what is meant by these proverbs. Really, we have many common proverbs, but I'll use the following proverbs. طيب حماد راح أسألك في المثل وأنت تقول لي شنو معناه. أوكي؟ الباب تجيك منه ريح سده واستريح. شنو معنى هذا؟ شو يعني لك؟
إذا يجيك فد شيء ضار من عنده
إيه.
لازم يعني
تتجنبه. أوكي. طيب المعلوح العنب يقول حامض. شنو معنى؟
يعني هو ما جاي يحصل
يعني هو ما يقدر يحصله فيقول عليه هذا الشيء. أوكي. This is really also depends upon the educational level of the patient, whether the patient is educated or not. I think he is very good in his proverb interpretation, and all these issues and all these steps is to assist the higher cerebral function of the patient.